S-turns is a ground reference maneuver. So we want to be really low to the ground so that we can reference things on the ground to help us with the maneuver. So we're going to be 1,000 feet above ground level. On my check ride, however, how I do this is I find the nearest airport and I look at their field elevation, and then I just add 1,000 to that, and then I descend down to that. So descend down to your altitude. It's really important to know where the winds are coming from with this maneuver or with any ground reference maneuver. So we're going to get into the Y. Like I said, S-turns are a ground reference maneuver, and it's going to teach us how wind impacts our rate and radius of turn, and how bank impacts our rate and radius of turn, stuff like that. It's going to require division of attention and coordination, because we have to look outside because of the ground references. So most likely we're going to be using a road. We're going to be using some reference points off of the road. We also need to make sure that we're looking outside because we are close to the ground in case something were to come up. And then we also want to make sure we're looking inside because we want to make sure that like our airspeed's not getting too fast or too slow. We want to make sure that our power's staying what we want it at. Make sure that we're not banking too much. Now we're going to get into how we do it. So I'm going to draw a little picture first. So this is our road. And before we pick which road we're going to use, we want to find our winds. So on my check ride, what I did was fly in each direction. So fly north and then record what the ground speed is. So let's say that our ground speed is 110 knots when we're flying north. And then we turn west and we fly west, and our ground speed is 100 knots. Then we fly east and our ground speed is 85 knots. And then we fly east and our ground speed is 95 knots. So this tells us that the wind is moving north. And now what we're gonna want to do is pick a road that runs perpendicular to the winds. So we're gonna want to pick a road that runs this way since our wind is coming from that way. So this road right here is perfect because it's going east to west, and we're gonna want to enter the maneuver on a downwind. So downwind is when the wind is on our backs. So since the wind is coming this way, we're gonna start the maneuver going that way. Before you get into the maneuver, you should do crack, but we're going to make sure that we're gonna get the plane trimmed out for straight and level. So put the power at normal cruise power, get the plane trimmed perfectly, take as much time as you need before you enter the maneuver. Because if the plane's not trimmed for straight and level and you're climbing all the time, you're gonna be fighting the plane this way, all this stuff. So basically we're going to start the maneuver going this way. We're going to bug our heading so that we can fly straight on that heading across this road. So when we get across the road, let's say that this is our plane and these are our wings. Our wings should be completely parallel with the road. So you should be flying over, and your wings, one wing should not be flying over the road before this wing comes over. We want to be flying straight across the road. Once we start getting into this turn, so this is what our end result is going to look like. We're going to make a semicircle turn on one side of the road. Then we're going to cross back over, make another semicircle turn on the other side of the road, cross back over, and exit out of that side. It makes an S shape. That's why it's called an S-turn. This tests your coordination, division of attention, control of the aircraft, and all of that, because your bank of the aircraft is going to be different at different parts of the S, and also the wind is going to be impacting you at different parts of the turn. So you really want to take that into account and add different control inputs to counteract that wind. So let's just picture this. We're flying this way, our plane, and we're going to start making this turn. We want both of these semicircles to be equal when we finish. So let's say that this one, I mean, I don't know if you're going this far, I don't know the exact measurements, but let's say that this one is 1 mile out. This one should also be 1 mile. Some people like to pick reference points off the road that they're gonna turn over that look the same distance off the road. I don't like to do that just because I feel like if you're adding the correct control inputs to counteract the wind, your semicircles are going to end up being relatively similar. And how do you know that these points that you're picking from just looking are going to be the same distance, you know? So we're flying this way. The wind is coming from this way. So the wind, when we're in this turn, is going to be constantly pushing us away from the road. So to counteract that, we're going to need to bank more at this part of the turn. So this beginning part of the turn, we're going to have to bank really steeply because the wind's going to be pushing us in our backs away from the road. We get to the halfway point of our turn, we're now starting to turn into the wind. So now we're not going to need as much bank. So now this part of the bank is going to be steep to counteract that wind. This part, we're going to slowly shallow out the bank. So we're not going to just immediately make our bank shallow. We're just going to do a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. And we should do that all the way up until this point. We should still be in a bank at this point. So we want to make sure that we're in a bank from here to here. Once we get to the road and our wings are over the road, that is when we want to be straight again. Once we're straight, we're going to fly across the road. Once our wings are over the road, we need to start banking again. So it's pretty much going to be the opposite of this turn. So this part of our turn should be shallow because the wind is coming at us and it's pushing us towards the road this time. And if we were to start banking really steeply, this is how our circle would look. Because we banked too early, the wind is pushing us towards the road so that we give the plane enough time to get out to the same distance that we got out to here. So we're banking shallow. Then once we get to this halfway point, that is when our bank is going to steepen because now we're getting into the downwind part of the turn and the wind is pushing us. And we want to make sure that we get that turn completed before the wind pushes us back to the road. So by the time we get here, our bank should still be in when we're flying up to this point. But once we get over the road, our wings should be level and we should be flying across the road at wings level. And this is where we should exit. So let's say at this starting point, this is our starting point right here. We're flying at a north heading. So that is our starting heading. So when we fly out here, we should be exiting the maneuver on our starting heading. So we should be exiting also on a north heading. I know that probably was like very confusing, but you'll be able to feel it better when you're in the plane. You'll be able to actually feel how the wind is pushing you, and it'll take a couple of tries to do it, but we'll do it. And then you can look on your ForeFlight and see your ground track and see if one semicircle was larger than the other one. And then you know, okay, I wasn't adding in the correct bank inputs, stuff like that. So you'll really get an idea of how the wind impacts our bank of our turn and then how that all contributes to the rate and the radius of the turn. That is S-turns. I hope that wasn't too confusing.